Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you all had a nice long weekend last week. I decided to take a bit of a break from filming because I was spending the weekend traveling around the Midlands with my partner. So sorry I didn't post anything last week. This one's probably going to be a pretty long video, so that might make up for it. Today I want to talk to you about kind of my story of how I became an archaeologist, why I'm interested in archaeology, and kind of just basically my life and the progression of my career. My interest in archaeology is something that I would say has been lifelong. I've always been someone who's been really interested in history and therefore archaeology. I think it's something that I actually get from my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother has been somebody who has always traveled tons throughout her life and has been to so many exotic places and has really had a love for that kind of stuff. And then my mom herself has always kind of has inherited that from my grandmother, but she also has quite somewhat strangely an interest in incorporating ancient Egyptian stuff in the decor of our home. Even when I was young, for example, she has a cross stitch of the funeral mask of Tutankhamun that my mother made when she was young. That's been in my house my entire life, as long as I can remember, as well as a coffee table in our living room that's, I don't think it's hexagonal, but it's multi-sided, and then in the middle of it is this big copper piece that has Egyptian kind of hieroglyphic artistic imagery engraved into it. And again, that's been in my house my entire life, and when I was a child I was completely fascinated with it, and when my parents finally move out and have to get rid of all their furniture, it's mine. When I was at school, history has always been one of my best subjects, along with English. I always kind of excelled in it because I always found everything that I was learning very interesting. When I went into high school, I took as many elective history courses as were available at my school. So I took an ancient history course, I took all these extra courses on Canadian history, and again, I did very well at all of them. So when the time was coming for me to decide what to do after I graduated from high school, I kind of knew that I was interested in doing something with archaeology/history, but I wasn't really sure what was out there. I have always had a really big interest in ancient Egypt and Egyptology, and when I was very young, I wanted to become an Egyptologist. So I was kind of looking into that. I remember this one day where I was in my guidance counselor's office looking through programs for history programs to do at university, and I saw the program for Near Eastern Archaeology for the Wilfrid Laurier University advertised, and I just kind of looked at it and I was like, I want to do that. That's what I'm going to do. So I then did everything that I needed in order to get accepted to the program, which was just to have a certain grade average and to have, I think it was a math course that I needed to take, which I got the required grade for and everything. I also went to the open day for the school, and because it was in my hometown, and talked to some people that were already in the program, and they just kind of, even though I already pretty much knew I was going to be going there, I was sold on the program when I went to the open day because they were talking all about the amazing field schools that they did and how they got to learn ancient languages and all this other stuff. So it just kind of, I was like, okay, yes, this is what I want to do. I was accepted into the program at Wilfrid Laurier University to do a Bachelor of Arts in Near Eastern Archaeology in the year of 2008-2009. That was my first year. I got there and it was just kind of I have found my people. I was never exactly someone you could describe as a loner when I was in high school, but my best friend, she didn't go to the same school as me, and she lived 45 minutes away. And by the time I finished high school, I didn't really have very many friends. Not that I didn't have any, but I didn't have a lot of close friends. And when I got to university, being in this group and this community where everyone had these very similar interests that I did, and all kind of wanted the same things and found the same things interesting. It was just it just really cemented that I was kind of studying the right thing, and I just found this amazing group of people that I just got along with so well, and it just really made university like such a better experience for me because of that. As I said, I always really wanted to focus on Egyptology, but that wasn't an option in my program. So I was doing a lot of courses based on equally on ancient Egypt and then Mesopotamia as well. And my first year I was also required to learn biblical Hebrew because we had a language component to our degree, so we had to do 2 years of an ancient language. The people in the classics program could do Greek or Latin, and we had to do, in my program, we had to do biblical Hebrew, which was really, really hard. But I managed to pass, thankfully. My second year, they didn't continue the biblical Hebrew course and instead did Babylonian. So I had to learn cuneiform, one of the oldest alphabets in the world, and it is so difficult. I passed all the courses that are great, but I really struggled with it. It's a really complex language and alphabet. The really cool thing was that our tutor was really kind of into doing it authentically, so he would make us, like our lessons were, we had these slabs of like Play-Doh or plasticine, and we had these reeds, and so we were doing everything that way rather than like writing triangles down on a piece of paper. And all of our exams, he got us potter's clay, and so we would have to write the exam on this piece of clay, and then he would fire it at a ceramics place in a kiln. And after everything had been graded and everything, you would get to your exam back and you'd have this piece of pottery that you had written in this ancient language in, which was really cool. At the end of my second year, I went for my first field school, which was in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and it was run by my school. One of our professors was the dig director along with a professor from another institution. And this field school was a requirement that I had to do one by my program. It had to be 6 weeks. There were 2 that were provided by my school, one which was based in Canada and the other one which was based in Jordan. Because obviously I was more interested in Middle Eastern archaeology, I did the Jordanian one. And all my friends that I had made from the past 2 years all basically went on it as well. And it was an amazing life experience. I couldn't recommend doing a field school like that enough. Like, I learned so many things. It just kind of affirmed that I loved archaeology and doing archaeology. And again, as my first introduction to digging, even though I'm not a particularly outdoorsy person, I just absolutely loved digging. And as I've talked about in another video, discovering something in the ground that nobody's like touched or seen or anything for like a couple thousand years, it's just a really heady experience, and it's a bit addictive, and it's just like, it's kind of undescribable in a lot of ways. It was also at this time that I was kind of realizing that Egyptology probably wasn't going to be where I was going to focusing my career, because there was so much competition. I was not the only person in my program who wanted to be an Egyptologist, like everybody did. And it became clear to me that doing something in Egyptology was going to require a lot more effort and time and a PhD and all this other stuff, with a lot less jobs available in the field. So while I was at field school, we happened to discover some medieval Bedouin burials which were unrelated to the site that we were actually digging, but were in a way in the way. When we discovered these burials, obviously they had to be removed, and we had a professional osteologist attached to our dig, so she and her students came over to do it. I was one of the people that was also allowed to participate in this, to teach how to dig up a skeleton, because it is different than how you would dig up anything else. And so through the process of kind of apprenticing to this during my field school, I discovered that I was actually really interested in osteoarchaeology, and I sucked up big time to this professor who was our osteologist. And even though I hadn't taken a course in osteology and I didn't know anything about the human skeleton, she could see that I was really enthusiastic about it and I wanted to learn. So she let me come to her own kind of semi-independent field school for a day or two to help out and see how things were done. and just said that if I took some courses in the intervening year, I would probably be able to come with her on her own osteology focused field school the next season. During my third year in 2011, two things happened. One, I started taking a human osteology course while I was at school, and the second was that I slightly changed my degree program. My school was going through some changes, and they were being forced to kind of streamline their programs. When I began, there were 4 different streams of archaeology that you could specialize in. Near Eastern, which is what I did, classical, which focused on Greece and Rome, prehistoric, which focused on obviously everything prehistoric, so like Stone Age kind of stuff, and then historic archaeology, which is kind of like more industrial and recent archaeology, especially in Canada. As a result, they decided that they were going to combine the 4 streams into 2, so Near Eastern and classical, and then prehistoric and historic. And anybody who started with the original 4 could finish out their degree without having to switch over, but you had the choice to be able to switch over. And I kind of realized that because based on some of the courses they were offering, I wasn't going to be able to probably finish in 4 years if I stuck to just the Near Eastern program. And as well, if I did the Near Eastern program, I would have to take a statistics course. And I am awful at math. I'm so bad. I'm the only person in my family that has like no mathematical skills whatsoever. Both my parents are really good at it. My brother has like a degree, started out with doing a degree in mathematical physics, whereas like when it comes to math, for me, there's just like something that I'm not getting. So I wanted to avoid taking the statistic course because I knew either I was going to fail or do really badly at it. And with the new program, you could take a different course, which was like an archaeological theory one. So I decided to switch into the new course that was Near Eastern Classical in order to kind of avoid doing statistics, which I now kind of regret. I wish I had actually learned it because I feel like it would be useful. But I ended up doing this instead, and which meant that I was taking more classes on Greece, ancient Greece and Rome, but that's fine because I find that interesting. It's not exactly what I'm just interested in, but I'd already taken a couple courses in it as electives, so it was fine. The summer after my third year, I went back to Jordan for field school, but this time instead of 3 weeks, I was there for 6 months. The reason I was there for so long was because I actually did 2 field schools, one after the other, rather than just doing one. For the first little while, I was doing, as I previously mentioned, the osteology field school that was focused on human remains with the professor from my original field school. She kind of did her own thing, but was attached to my original field school, and she decided that year to kind of completely go out on her own and do it about 6 weeks earlier than they usually did the field school. So I was with her for 6 weeks, and through a completely unrelated event, we ended up doing a lab season instead of a field season, but I still learned a lot, so that was fine. And then I did another 6 weeks at my original field school. I had about 2 weeks in between where I kind of floated around the town that we were in and stayed with some friends who were on a different field school, but just like let me literally sleep on their floor. And again, the second time that I went back, I ended up doing another course. This one wasn't mandatory for my degree. However, it was offered and it was like a next level one. So you were being evaluated as a supervisor rather than just as a volunteer, and you had to write reports and manage others and kind of teach people how to dig and stuff like that. So I decided I wanted that credit. If I was going, I might as well get it. And so I spent that 6 weeks as a supervisor rather than just as a volunteer during my field school, and I had to supervise 2 students, and they were great. I had an amazing time. A lot of my friends came back for the second time, and we just, enjoyed ourselves in the desert for a couple weeks. During my 4th year, I was trying to make sure that I had enough courses to graduate, and I was doing quite a few electives. I also managed to do a course that was at another university, but that was in the same town as as Wilfrid Laurier. It was an osteology course that focused a bit more on all of the things that you can find out from bones rather than just like human anatomy, which is what my first course was all about. And so I did this course at the University of Waterloo with Dr. Mariah Liston, and it was really informative. I really enjoyed it. We got to do stuff like trying out facial reconstruction and dental casts and all that stuff. And she's an excellent teacher, so I really enjoyed that class with her. At the end of my 4th year of university, because I was just so in love with going on field school, I decided to go back for the 3rd time. I was a supervisor that year. I wasn't getting any credit for it like I was for the first 2 years, but you got like discounts the more times you went, so it wasn't as expensive as like the first time I went. And I just kind of really enjoyed my last year, and it kind of had like a bit of a swan song, I guess, with some of my friends because we were all leaving, and successfully did the 6 weeks there. When I actually just missed my graduation from university by a couple days because I stayed in Jordan the entire time instead of cutting it short by about a couple days. Once I finished my degree in 2012, I decided that I was going to be taking a year off of school. I already knew that I wanted to do a master's program in osteology, but I wanted to take some time to kind of save up some money to do so and to work and just kind of have a break from school. So I started off just working as like a sales rep at Chapters, which is a Canadian bookstore chain, which was amazing and I loved it. And then in December of 2012, I was offered a position at a local archaeological company. This company was actually started by one of the professors at my university a long time ago. He was a prehistory professor, so I actually never took class with him. But the company itself hired a lot of people from my program because they would just kind of recruit students straight out of school to work for them. So I had a lot of friends that were already working there, and through a series of events, I was offered a job, and I accepted it. I worked there for 1 week, during which I had the worst first day, and then I would say first week of work I've ever had anywhere. Which is another story entirely. Then we had a break for Christmas, and then I started again in January and worked for them straight up until August. At some point in, I think it was December, January that year, 2012, 2013, I was accepted for a Master's of Science in Osteoarchaeology at the University of Edinburgh. I also applied to Exeter and Leicester. I applied to UK universities for a variety of reasons, partly because the programs were 1 year instead of 2 like they are in Canada, so it kind of condenses everything for you. And I just really kind of at that point wanted to get out of my hometown. At this point, my entire life had been in like my hometown for university, for everything, so I just kind of like needed to get out. And I'd always wanted to go to the UK. Part of my family heritage is Scottish. I'd gone on a trip to Scotland when I was quite young, and I just remembered loving it so much. So that's why part of the reason why I decided to go to the University of Edinburgh. It's a very well-regarded program, and it seemed really interesting. I worked from January to the middle of August at my archaeology company, and during that time I discovered how much I disliked working in Canadian commercial archaeology, but it was a useful experience to have anyway. And then in the middle of August, I moved to Edinburgh. I gave myself 2 weeks to find a place to live before school started, which in retrospect was quite risky, but turned out for me well anyway. And then in September 2013, I started my master's in human osteoarchaeology. The first semester for me was quite easy because I'd already done quite a bit of the stuff that we were learning already during my undergraduate, but not everyone's done that, so they always start from scratch. So the first semester for me was quite a bit of a breeze. Again, the class that I was in, we were all very close. We had one girl particularly who always planned events for us to go out and socialize with each other, which kind of helped everybody bond and make friends. So even though when I moved to Edinburgh I didn't know anybody, I very quickly made a group of friends there that was kind of a support system for me since my family was so far away. I also met my current partner during that time, and we started dating. So I had lots of friends, and I just loved being in Edinburgh, and my program itself was like really useful and I was really enjoying it. My second semester of my master's was a bit more difficult because we were introduced to more stuff that I wasn't familiar with yet. When I finished my classes and my exams, I then went on a 3-week field school to Bulgaria with my supervisor and a couple other students to work on a collection of skeletons from a Hellenistic and Greek colony. Then I used the information that we got from these skeletons for my thesis project and spent the rest of the summer writing my thesis, which I did pretty okay on. I didn't get distinction. I was close-ish. However, I kind of struggled to get information that would make my dissertation like distinction caliber out of the material that I was working with, which is probably my own fault that I wasn't working hard enough, but I did well enough and I was happy enough to at least, you know, pass, that I was fine with the grade that I got. When I finished my dissertation, I knew that I wanted to try and at least stay in the UK. A lot of people like to tell me it was because of my boyfriend at the time, but it was not. I'd already knew that I kind of wanted to try and work here in commercial because I thought it would be different and probably more to my liking than Canadian stuff was. However, when I started out, I had a hard time finding a job because it can be a bit difficult to break into the market in commercial archaeology over here. So in the meantime, while I was trying to send out my CV to everyone, I worked as like a waitress and a part-time receptionist. And then in February 2015, I was offered my first contract in commercial archaeology over here, which initially was for 5 weeks and then eventually ended up being about 10 months. Until the end of October. Since October 2015, I have been working off and on in archaeology until I started my most recent contract this year, last year in September 2016. I would say that during the time when I didn't have a steady contract, I was working off and on, definitely more on than off. I would only have like maybe sometimes a couple weeks in between or a few days, or I wouldn't even have time in between my contracts. Because I was really aggressive about every time that I knew I was running out of work, I like inundated everybody with my CV to try and get myself more work, which generally worked in my favor because I started to have a couple companies that would just call me whenever they had something available, which I could say yes or no to. So my current contract that I'm now working on started in September 2016. It's a really big infrastructure project located in the Midlands in England, so I've kind of had to sort of move down here. I try to get home as often as possible, but it's quite expensive, and my partner still lives up in Edinburgh where he's doing a PhD. So it's been difficult. As of the current moment, I am working as a level 2 site assistant, so I'm not a basic trainee. I'm hoping I have just over 2 years of experience working in UK commercial archaeology, not including the stuff that I did back home or on field school. And I just got my driver's license, so I'm hoping soon, fingers crossed, to start being able to move up the ladder into getting a more project officery role, doing watching briefs, stuff like that. But we'll see how it goes. I'd also really like to eventually get into doing actual osteoarchaeology work, which, you know, would justify coming over here and spending all the money that I did to get my master's degree. But as I've said before, those jobs are few and far between. But, you know, again, fingers crossed, I might be able to work something out at some point. But I'm looking to move up the ladder in the next year. Between usually the second and the fifth year is when people will start to see upward movement in their careers. Hopefully I can make that happen for myself. I don't want to stay a site assistant forever. As much as it's going to be fun to dig, I would like to be paid more, and the only way that I can do that is to become a more management level position. But first I have to pay my dues by spending months upon months watching machines, doing watching briefs. I'll keep you guys updated if when I manage to either leave this job and get a job promotion or whatever. Every once in a while I'll try and keep you guys updated on what I'm doing and so on and so forth. Yeah, I know that this has been really long-winded, but you know, I'm almost 28, so that's a lot of time to cover over my life, and I've tried to be as succinct as possible. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and gotten a little bit more of an introduction to who I am as a person and like my career in archaeology and how I've gotten to where I am today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like, comment, or subscribe. I've also recently started an Instagram page with an aim of trying to kind of give a bit more of an insight for people into what life is like on site, and I seem to be somewhat more successful posting on Instagram than I am on Twitter. So I've got both of those below. If you feel like it, please follow me on either platform, and I will see you guys next week. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye!